Welcome to the deep dive from BookCast FM,
where we're bringing books to life one cast at a time.
Today, we're diving into something that really shifted the conversation about success. Emotional intelligence.
Right, the book by Daniel Goleman. It's a big one.
It really is. His whole idea is that EQ, emotional intelligence, is maybe even more important than IQ.
Yeah, for success, happiness, pretty much everything. And today we're going to unpack why he argues that.
Exactly. We've got a detailed summary here. It covers his main points, the 5 key parts of EQ, themes, quotes, even chapter breakdowns.
So the mission today?
To give everyone listening a solid but, easy to grasp understanding of Goleman's core ideas and maybe how they apply to, us, our emotions, our relationship.
Sounds good.
Where do we start?
Let's kick off with the big picture, Goleman's core thesis.
Okay, so Goleman basically argues that this set of skills, EQ skills, they're huge predictors of success, like across the board, personal life, work life.
Relationships, mental health, even physical health, yeah. And these skills are things like self-awareness, managing your emotions, motivation, empathy, social skills.
Things we don't usually measure on an IQ test.
Exactly. He's saying these might actually tell us more about how someone will do in life than just their cognitive ability.
It's such a shift of perspective, isn't it? Moving beyond just brain power to how well you navigate your inner world and the world with other people.
Right. So those 5 components are key. Should we break them down?
Yeah, let's start with the first one, self-awareness. What does Goleman mean by that exactly?
Self-awareness is basically the foundation. It's knowing your emotions as they happen.
Okay.
And understanding, how they affect your thoughts, your actions, even trusting your gut feelings. Goleman puts it nicely. He says it's being aware of both our mood and our thoughts about that mood.
So it's not just feeling angry, but noticing, okay, I'm feeling angry, and maybe thinking about why and what that anger might make me do.
Exactly. That noticing part is crucial. It's like stepping back for a second.
Which leads nicely into the next one, right? Self-regulation. How does that follow?
Well, once you know what you're feeling, that's the self-awareness bit, then self-regulation is about managing it.
Managing those feelings.
Yeah, managing your internal state, your impulses. It's about not just reacting instantly. It's creating that little space between the feeling and the action.
So using that anger example again.
Yeah.
Self-regulation is pausing instead of yelling, choosing a better response.
Precisely. Responding thoughtfully instead of just, letting the emotion drive the bus completely.
Makes sense. Okay, third component, motivation. How does that fit into EQ?
Goleman's take on motivation here is interesting. It's about the emotional tendencies that help you reach your goals.
Emotional tendencies.
Yeah, especially intrinsic motivation, that inner drive. Doing something because you find it fulfilling or you're passionate about it, not just for the reward.
So it's that resilience, that persistence that comes from within, fueled by positive emotion, maybe.
Exactly. That's what keeps you going when things get tough. It's not just wanting the end result, but having the emotional stamina.
Got it. Okay, number 4 is empathy. This one feels really important for interacting with others.
Oh, hugely. Empathy is about tuning into other people's emotions, understanding their needs, their concerns.
Seeing things from their perspective.
Right, putting yourself in their shoes emotionally. And Goleman points out something key here. Empathy builds on self-awareness.
How so?
Well, he says, the more open we are to our own emotions, the more skilled we will be in reading feelings in others. You kind of need to understand your own feelings to get someone else's.
That connection makes perfect sense. Hard to read the room if you can't even read yourself.
Okay, and the last one.
Social skills.
Social skills are sort of where it all comes together in action. It's about managing relationships well.
Taking all that awareness, regulation, empathy, and using it.
Yeah. Using it to build rapport, handle conflict, influence people positively, work well in teams. It's EQ in practice in the social world.
Okay, so those 5, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, that's the core framework.
That's the heart of it.
Now, the summary also dives into some broader themes. One that jumps out is the brain's emotional architecture. Sounds fascinating.
It really is. Goleman looks at the neuroscience behind emotions. He talks about the limbic system, and specifically the amygdala as the brain's kind of emotional alarm center.
The amygdala. I've heard of it.
Right. And he introduces this concept of the amygdala hijack.
Hijack. What's that?
It's when your emotional brain, the amygdala, reacts so fast and so strongly to something that it basically bypasses your rational thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex.
Whoa. So you react before you think.
Pretty much. Goleman says the emotional brain responds to an event more quickly than the thinking brain. That hijack explains those moments of like instant rage or fear.
That explains a lot, that feeling of, why did I just do that, after you've calmed down?
Exactly. Understanding that biology is a big step towards managing those reactions.
Another theme mentioned is nature versus nurture. How much of EQ is baked in, and how much can we learn?
That's a key point. Goleman acknowledges genetics play a role. You know, some people might be naturally more emotionally reactive or calm.
Sure. Temperament.
Right? But he strongly argues that EQ isn't fixed. It can be learned and developed through experience, education, just reflecting on yourself.
So we're not stuck with whatever EQ we started with.
Not at all. That's one of the most hopeful messages in the book, I think. We can actually improve our emotional intelligence.
That is hopeful. Okay, what about the link between emotions and health? The summary touches on that too.
Yeah, this is crucial. Goleman discusses how chronic stress, like constant anger or anxiety, isn't just bad for your mood, it actually impacts your physical body.
How so?
It can weaken the immune system, increase the risk of heart disease, things like that. It shows how deeply connected our minds and bodies really are.
So managing emotions isn't just for feeling better mentally, it's for physical well-being too.
Definitely. It's holistic.
And this leads into the importance of childhood, right? Early emotional learning.
Yes, Goleman puts a lot of emphasis on this. He argues that learning to understand and manage emotions should start early. Skills like impulse control, empathy, handling disagreements.
Things kids need to be taught, essentially.
Yeah, just like we teach reading or math. He sees early emotional education as laying the groundwork for a healthier, more successful life later on.
Makes sense. Give kids the tools early. What about the workplace? How does EQ play out there?
Hugely important, especially in leadership. Goleman argues that for leaders, EQ is often more critical than technical skills or IQ.
Really? More important?
In many ways, yes. Leaders with high EQ can understand their teams better, motivate them, handle conflicts smoothly. They create a better working environment.
It's about connecting with people, not just managing tasks.
Exactly. Leading with heart, as one chapter title puts it.
And the final theme mentioned is empathy and society. What's the connection there?
Goleman suggests that a lack of emotional literacy, particularly empathy, can actually fuel bigger societal problems.
Like what?
Things like violence, addiction, mental illness. He sort of hints that if we as a society focused more on developing emotional intelligence, we could potentially build more compassionate and functional communities.
Wow, that's a powerful idea. Improving individual EQ could have ripple effects across society.
It's a compelling thought, isn't it?
Definitely. Okay, so based on all that, what are the big takeaways for listeners, the key points to remember?
Well, first off, the big one, EQ can be developed at any age. That's really empowering.
Good. What else?
Second, managing emotions isn't about suppressing them. It's about understanding and guiding them. Big difference.
Right, not bottling things up.
Exactly. Third, having higher EQ generally leads to better outcomes, relationships, health, job performance, leadership.
Yeah.
It touches everything.
Okay.
Fourth, teaching emotional skills early to kids is incredibly valuable, sets them up for life. And finally, maybe the core message. Emotional habits are just as important as intellectual skills. Maybe even more so for overall success and happiness.
Those are really solid points to hold on to. The summary also pulls out some memorable quotes, any that really capture the essence.
Oh, definitely. The one right at the start. In a very real sense, we have two minds, one that thinks and one that feels. That sets the stage perfectly.
The thinking brain and the feeling brain.
Yep. Then there's this one that really hits the main argument. What really matters for success is a definite set of emotional skills, your EQ, not just purely cognitive abilities.
That directly challenges the IQ is everything idea.
It does, and this one gets really practical. If your emotional abilities aren't in hand, if you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are not going to get very far.
Oof, that's blunt. High IQ isn't enough if your EQ is low.
Pretty much. And finally, this clarifies the relationship. Emotional intelligence is not the opposite of intelligence. It is the unique intersection of both.
So they work together, heart and head.
Exactly. It's about integrating them.
Great quotes. Okay, let's get even more specific. The summary breaks down key chapters. Chapter 1. What are emotions for? What's the gist?
This chapter basically asks why we even have emotions. Goleman says they're evolutionary survival tools.
Survival tools.
Yeah, like fear makes you run from danger, anger helps you fight. They helped our ancestors react fast, long before we developed complex thought. Our emotional brain is older than our rational one.
So emotions have a purpose. They're not just feelings.
Right. They guide us even if we don't always understand how. He says emotions have their own reasons and rhythms. The key here is understanding them, not trying to shut them down. And he introduces the amygdala hijack concept early on.
Okay, that sets the stage. Chapter 2 then zooms in on that hijack, anatomy of an emotional hijacking.
Right. This gets into the brain wiring. He talks about 2 pathways for emotional info. A fast, low road, straight to the amygdala, that's the hijack trigger.
Instant reaction.
Yep. And a slower high road that goes through the thinking cortex first, allowing for analysis. The hijack happens when the low road wins.
Like in that road rage example, someone cuts you off and bam, instant fury.
Exactly. Before your rational brain can say, hey, maybe they just didn't see me, he says, it is sobering to realize that we can be completely taken over by our emotions.
So the takeaway is what? Identify your triggers.
Yeah. Know what sets you off. And practice that pause just a moment to let the high road catch up.
Okay. Chapter 3 is titled When Smart is Dumb. Love that. What's the point here?
This is where he really challenges the IQ-only model. He shows how smart people, academically smart, can fail miserably in life because they lack EQ.
They can't manage relationships or their own emotions.
Exactly. They might be brilliant, but as Goleman says, people with high IQs can be stunningly poor pilots of their private lives. He brings in the marshmallow test here, too.
Ah, the delaying gratification test.
Right. Showing how that ability to control impulses and EQ skill predicted future success better than IQ scores did for those kids.
So value the soft skills, too. Don't just focus on book smarts.
Pretty much. They're not soft, they're essential.
Chapter 4 brings us back inward. Know thyself. Focusing on self-awareness again.
Yeah, deep dive into the foundation. Recognizing your emotions as they happen and understanding their impact. He talks about meta-emotion, basically, knowing how you feel about your feelings.
Being aware of your reaction to your own mood.
Exactly. And he says, people with greater certainty about their feelings are better pilots of their lives. That awareness gives you control.
How do we get better at it? Did he suggest things?
Yeah, simple stuff like naming your emotions. Okay, I'm feeling frustrated right now. Or keeping a mood journal. Even asking trusted friends for feedback.
Just pay more attention, really. Okay, Chapter 5. Passion slaves. Sounds dramatic. This is self-regulation.
Yep. Moving from knowing your emotions to managing them. Avoiding being a slave to your passions or impulses.
So not letting anger or anxiety run the show.
Right. But again, it's not suppression. It's channeling them constructively, finding balance. He says being able to find balance in your emotional life is crucial for happiness. And he links this mood management back to health, too.
And the marshmallow test again. Impulse control.
Exactly. It's a core part of self-regulation. Techniques he suggests include recognizing triggers, using self-talk to reframe things, mindfulness, exercise.
Practical tools. Good. Chapter 6. The master aptitude. What's a master aptitude?
Motivation. Specifically, that intrinsic motivation we talked about, the internal drive.
Why is that the master one?
Because it fuels everything else, learning, resilience, sticking with goals. It's linked to self-control, too. You need to manage impulses to stay motivated long-term. He also talks about flow, that state of being totally absorbed.
And optimism comes in here.
Big time. He calls optimism the key to achievement. It keeps you persistent. He uses the example of optimistic insurance salespeople who outsold the pessimists because they didn't give up after rejection.
Fascinating. Okay, Chapter 7. The roots of empathy. Back to understanding others.
Right. Delving into how we connect emotionally. He talks about the biological basis, maybe mirror neurons, helping us feel what others feel.
Feeling into someone else's state.
Kind of. And again, he stresses the link to self-awareness. You got to know your own feelings to read others accurately. He even says the roots of morality are to be found in empathy.
Wow. That's deep. How do we boost empathy?
Active listening is key. Pay attention to nonverbal cues, too, not just words. Ask questions. Try to genuinely understand their viewpoint, even if you disagree.
Practice makes perfect, I guess. Chapter 8. The social arts. Applying empathy.
Exactly. Taking that understanding and using it effectively in relationships. Building rapport, handling conflict, influencing others positively.
The practical side of EQ in the social world.
Yep. It's learned, he says, and fueled by empathy. Skills like clear communication, persuasion, not manipulation, collaboration. As he puts it, the art of relationships is largely the skill of managing emotions in others.
Managing emotions in others. That sounds tricky.
It means understanding their emotional state and responding appropriately to build connection or resolve issues, not control them. Being attuned.
Okay, got it. Now we move into applying EQ. Chapter 9. Intimate enemies. Ooh. Romance.
Yep, how EQ, or lack of it, plays out in romantic relationships. He looks at communication, conflict.
The enemies part sounds bad.
It refers to couples stuck in destructive cycles. He uses John Gottman's research here, the Four Horsemen.
Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling.
Those are the ones, really toxic patterns. Goleman emphasizes emotional attunement between partners and shifting from blame to owning your part. Successful couples still argue, he notes, but they do it constructively.
So EQ skills like empathy, self-regulation, good communication are vital for love.
Absolutely critical. Using I statements, listening empathetically, managing your own reactivity during fights.
Makes sense. Chapter 10, Managing with Heart. Back to the workplace. Leadership again.
Yes, reinforcing that EQ is key for leaders. Creating trust, collaboration, good morale. Attuned leaders bring out the best in people.
The opposite being toxic workplaces where emotions are ignored.
Exactly. That leads to burnout and low productivity. Emotionally intelligent leaders create resonance, Goleman says. They set a positive emotional tone.
Oh, by being empathetic, giving good feedback, managing their own stress.
All of that. Creating psychological safety so people feel okay speaking up.
Crucial stuff. Chapter 11, Mind and Medicine. The health connection again.
Yep, focusing on that mind-body link through psychoneuroimmunology, how chronic negative emotions act like a slow poison.
Weakening immunity, harming health.
Right. But also how positive emotions and social support can be protective. He mentions studies on heart patients, the impact of loneliness. It's about proactively managing stress and cultivating emotional well-being for physical health.
So stress management techniques, positive thinking, connection, they're part of preventative healthcare, really.
You could definitely see it that way.
Okay, part 4, Windows of Opportunity.
Yeah.
Chapter 12, The Family Crucible. Back to childhood influences.
Yes, how family life is our first school for emotional learning. Parents are emotional tutors.
How they handle the child's emotions shapes the child's EQ.
Exactly. He outlines 4 parenting styles: dismissive, disapproving, laissez-faire, and the best one, the emotion coach.
What does the emotion coach do?
They validate the child's feelings, I see you're feeling sad, but also help them understand and manage the emotion constructively. It builds resilience and understanding.
Guiding them through it, not shutting it down.
Precisely.
Chapter 13 is Trauma and Emotional Relearning. That sounds heavy, but important.
It is. It looks at how trauma, especially early trauma, can disrupt EQ development. It can actually rewire the brain's emotional responses.
Can that be undone?
Goleman offers hope here. He talks about the brain's plasticity, its ability to change. Through therapy, supportive relationships, conscious effort, emotional relearning is possible.
So even deep emotional wounds aren't necessarily permanent barriers.
No. Emotional trauma leaves its imprint. But the brain is plastic, he says. Healing and developing healthier emotional patterns is possible.
That's incredibly important. Chapter 14, Temperament is not destiny. Revisiting nature versus nurture.
Yeah, reinforcing the idea that while we might have innate tendencies or temperament, it doesn't lock us in.
Biology isn't destiny?
Exactly. Experience sculpts the raw material of temperament. We can actively cultivate EQ skills regardless of our starting point. You might be naturally shy or reactive, but you can still learn empathy or self-regulation.
So don't use temperament as an excuse not to work on your EQ.
Pretty much. Focus on the skills you can build.
Okay, last part, part 5, Emotional Literacy. And chapter 15, Schooling the Emotions. This sounds like a call to action.
It absolutely is. Goleman makes a passionate case for teaching emotional literacy systematically in schools. Social and emotional learning, or SEL.
Teaching kids self-awareness, empathy, relationship skills is part of the curriculum.
Yes. He argues it improves everything: behavior, learning, well-being, future success. He points to successful SEL programs as proof.
And his final point is
that educating the emotions is just as important as educating the intellect, perhaps even more so. It's fundamental.
Wow, what a comprehensive look at why our emotional lives matter so much. This deep dive into Goleman's emotional intelligence really drives home how developing our EQ can genuinely change things for the better.
Absolutely. It impacts pretty much every area, doesn't it?
It really does. So for everyone listening, maybe take a moment to think about those 5 components again.
Self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills.
Yeah. Which areas feel strong for you? Which ones might be worth exploring a bit more for your own growth?
How does this stuff play out in your day-to-day life, in your relationships, at work? What are your emotional habits like?
Lots to think about. And, we've covered a lot, but this is really just scratching the surface of Goleman's work.
Oh, for sure. The book itself goes into so much more depth, so many more examples and nuances.
So if this has sparked your interest, we definitely encourage you to grab a copy of Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Support the author.
There's a link right in the description if you want to check it out.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Deep Dive from BookCast FM.
Bringing books to life, one cast at a time.